The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the dusty plains of West Ridge. Clara McKinley wiped the sweat from her brow as she leaned against the barn, the creaking wood behind her a familiar sound in the otherwise quiet evening. The ranch had been in her late husband's family for generations, and now, with him gone, it was hers and hers alone to run. The work was hard, relentless, and often thankless. Fences broke, cattle wandered, debts piled up. Grief didn't pause to let her breathe, but neither did ranch life. She heard the low crunch of gravel before she saw him. A tall figure walked up the long dirt drive, silhouetted against the setting sun. He moved like a man who belonged to the land, broad shoulders, thick arms, a slow and deliberate gait. Clara straightened up, instinctively reaching for the wrench tucked into her back pocket. She wasn't used to strangers dropping by unannounced, especially not ones built like freight trains. As he drew closer, she could see him better. His shirt clung to his chest with sweat, dust covering his jeans and boots. He looked like he'd been walking for miles. His jaw was square, shadowed with a couple days' worth of stubble, and his blue eyes had a weary but determined glint. He took off his hat as he approached her, revealing tousled dark hair. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and deep like gravel in a steel bucket. "I heard you might be needing some help around here." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Who told you?" "That old man at the gas station in town. Said the McKinley place was barely hanging on. Figured I'd see if you had work. I'm not picky." She crossed her arms. "I don't hire strangers, especially ones who show up right before dark." He nodded, unbothered. "Understandable. Name's Colt Harding. I don't got much, but I've worked ranches all over Texas and New Mexico. Fences, livestock, machinery, you name it. All I'm askin is a place to sleep and something to eat. I'll earn every bit." Colt. It suited him. He looked like he could lift a bull with one arm and fix a tractor with the other. Still, Clara wasn't in the business of trusting men anymore. Not since Jack died and left her with more questions than answers, including a pile of unpaid bills and whispers of infidelity. But her ranch was falling apart. The last hired hand had quit 2 weeks ago, and the cattle weren't going to sort themselves. She studied him for a moment longer. His shoulders slouched slightly, not out of weakness but exhaustion. He wasn't lying, he'd been walking a while. And maybe, like her, he had nowhere else to go. "You any good with fence wire?" she asked finally. He nodded, like second nature. "There's a break on the west boundary. You fix it, you get dinner and a bed in the loft. No promises beyond that." "Fair enough," he said with a small smile, tipping his hat. She gestured toward the barn, then handed him a pair of gloves and some tools. "Sun sets in 40 minutes. Hope you work fast." Colt just nodded again and got to work without another word. As she watched him walk off, tool bag slung over his shoulder, Clara felt something she hadn't in a long time, a strange flicker of curiosity, maybe even a little hope. The way he moved, slow but deliberate, like he carried the weight of something unseen. He hadn't tried to charm her or play games. He just asked for work. That night, she stood at the edge of the porch, arms folded, watching the stars bloom above the plains. A warm light spilled from the kitchen window behind her, and the scent of beef stew simmering on the stove lingered in the air. In the distance, she saw Colt returning, the fence tools slung over one shoulder, his step slower but steady. "Well?" she asked. "Fixed," he replied. "One of your posts was half rotted. Reinforced it with a spare I found by the shed." She nodded. "Dinner's ready. Wash your hands first." He smiled just a little as he passed her, heading for the basin near the barn. And Clara, who hadn't shared a meal with a man in over a year, led him inside. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But he'd shown up when she needed help most, And maybe, just maybe, fate had sent her a stranger with strong hands. Clara sat at the edge of her bed that night, brushing out her long brown hair by lamplight, the soft creak of the ranch house settling around her. The bed on the other side of the room, once shared with her husband Jack, remained cold and untouched on his side, though he'd been gone nearly 11 months. She still hadn't moved any of his clothes, not the boots by the closet, not the silver belt buckle on the dresser, not even the picture frame turned face down weeks ago but never put away, downstairs. She heard the faint creak of floorboards in the barn loft. Colt had finished the fence and eaten dinner without saying much. He was a quiet man, but not in a brooding way, more like someone who had grown used to silence and didn't need to fill it. Clara wasn't sure if she found that comforting or dangerous. She sighed and looked out the window. The moon lit the paddocks in a soft silver glow. Cattle shifted in the fields, and a coyote cried somewhere far off. The ranch never really slept, and neither did she. Running it alone had been harder than she ever imagined. Jack had always said she was tough enough to manage it, built like barbed wire. He used to joke, but tough didn't keep the roof from leaking or the tractor from breaking down. Tough didn't keep the bank from calling every third day. And tough didn't stop her 6-year-old daughter Maisie from asking, "Mommy, when's Daddy coming back?" She couldn't say the words out loud. Not yet. The lies had started small. Daddy's working up north. Then they'd turned into silence. Now Maisie rarely asked. But the ache in the little girl's eyes said more than words ever could. That morning, Clara had nearly broken down when she found the feed bill shoved into the mailbox, a final notice. The hay supplier was done giving her time, and if she didn't pay by the 15th, they'd cut her off. No feed, no cattle. No cattle, no ranch. She was stuck. Proud enough not to ask her father for help, too angry at her brother to speak to him, and too tired to care what the town gossips whispered when she walked into the hardware store without makeup or a smile. She worked sunup to sundown, slept in 3-hour shifts, and was still always behind. It felt like treading water with rocks in her pockets. Hiring Colt, even temporarily, had been a risk. But what choice did she have? She couldn't keep doing it all alone. The next morning came. Early, as it always did. Clara rose before the sun, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, and started a pot of coffee before checking on Maisie. The girl was curled up under her patchwork blanket, clutching a stuffed cow she'd named Buttons. Clara gently kissed her forehead before stepping outside. To her surprise, Colt was already in the field, shirt off, working one of the horses in the corral. His muscles flexed as he tugged the reins, guiding the stubborn gelding in circles. The morning mist clung to his skin like dew on leather. Clara paused at the porch, her hand tightening around her coffee mug. She wasn't blind. The man was built like a Greek statue. But it wasn't just his body that caught her off guard. It was how naturally he moved around the animal, how he spoke low and steady, like he wasn't breaking the horse but trying to understand it. She stepped down onto the grass and called out, "You don't waste any time, do you?" He turned, offering a respectful nod. Horse was pacing. Figured he needed to move before the heat came in. Clara approached the fence and leaned her arms against it. "That one's mean as a snake. Jack tried to break him 3 times. Colt gave a soft chuckle. "He's not mean, just scared." "Ain't been handled right," Clara blinked. "Sounds like you're talking about more than just the horse." He didn't respond, but the corners of his mouth twitched like he appreciated her noticing. They stood in silence a moment before Clara finally said, "Breakfast is in the kitchen when you're done." He nodded again and turned back to the gelding, murmuring soft words that Clara couldn't quite hear. As she walked back to the house, her thoughts tangled. The ranch was still a mess. The bills were still due. Her daughter still needed more than Clara could give. But for the first time in a long time, Someone else was here. Someone who didn't ask for much, but gave what he could. And though her heart was guarded behind iron gates, the hinges creaked just a little that morning. Summer in Westridge didn't ease up for anyone. By mid-morning, the sun was already scorching, baking the earth and searing the sky with heat waves. Dust clung to everything: skin, clothes, the insides of lungs, and the air carried the dry, burnt scent of hay and hot metal. Clara had spent the morning in the fields checking irrigation lines. The system had been temperamental since spring, and now half her alfalfa crop was dying in dry patches. She yanked off her gloves in frustration and wiped her face with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. She glanced up the hill toward the northern fence line, where Colt was working shirtless again, hammering new posts into the soil. Each swing of the sledgehammer sent vibrations through the earth, his body glistening with sweat in the sun. He worked in a rhythm-focused, efficient quiet. Clara hated how often she looked up there. She wasn't some naive girl, taken by brawn and biceps. She was a widow, a mother, and a woman who'd been left to patch together a life out of debt and heartache. But there was no denying the pull. It wasn't just his looks, though he was, undeniably, breathtaking. It was the way he carried himself. No swagger, no flattery. Just calm presence, strength, and hands that worked without complaint. The kind of man Jack never really was. Clara turned back to the irrigation pipe and let out a frustrated groan as it popped loose again, spraying a fine mist of water across her legs. She slammed it shut and threw the wrench down. "You all right?" A voice called. She didn't need to turn to know it was Colt. "I'm fine," she said, crouching back down, trying to hide the heat in her cheeks. He approached anyway, wiping his hands on a rag. "That pipe's been rusted through at the seam. You need a new coupling." "I know," she muttered, "but new isn't in the budget this month." Colt crouched beside her and examined the joint. "I could jury-rig a seal with some tape, and wire, maybe reinforce it with a clamp from the shed." "You sure?" He looked up at her, their faces closer than they'd ever been. "Positive." There was a long pause. Her breath caught in her throat, not from surprise, but from something deeper, heavier. She realized then how long it had been since someone had looked her in the eye without pity or expectation. Just steady, grounded attention. Colt noticed her hesitation and leaned back slightly, giving her space. "I'll get on it," she nodded, eyes dropping. "Thanks." By mid-afternoon, the makeshift repair was holding. Colt had found a clamp that Jack had thrown into the junk pile months ago and used it like a pro. Clara stood watching him finish. Up, her arms crossed, not in defense, but restraint. The tension between them was starting to grow roots, not spoken, not touched, but present, alive in every glance, every brush of hands when tools were exchanged, every moment that hung a second too long. Maisie interrupted the silence by running out of the house with wild curls and bare feet. "Mama, can I give the chickens?" "They're corn?" Clara turned, relieved by the break. "Only a little, honey. Don't dump the whole bucket this time." Maisie giggled and ran off toward the coop, her energy bright, and UNTAMED. Colt watched the girl with a soft expression. "She's got your fire." Clara glanced at him. "She's all I've got." He nodded slowly. "You're doing good." "By her." Her throat tightened. People said things like that all the time, but when he said it, it felt real, like he saw the weight of her choices, the cracks she tried to hide. She exhaled, a bit shakily. "Some days I feel like I'm one fence post away from falling apart." "Then let me hold the next one for you," he said quietly. Clara turned toward him, startled not just by the words, but by the quiet sincerity behind them. He wasn't hitting on her. He wasn't playing at anything. He was just offering to be there. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her heart, still thick with grief and suspicion, Didn't know how to accept kindness without a catch. So she did what she always did. She got back to work. That evening, the sun dipped behind the hills again, casting long shadows over the land. Clara stood on the porch, sipping cold, sweet tea. Colt walked past, a towel slung over his shoulder, his back damp from another day of labor. They nodded to each other. No words, but the tension, soft, slow, undeniable, lingered in the space between them, as thick as the heat still rising from the earth. The storm rolled in fast that evening, unexpected and unforgiving. By the time Clara had secured the feed shed and brought Maisie in from the coop, thunder was cracking overhead and rain was falling in heavy sheets. Lightning lit up the prairie, followed almost immediately by the kind of thunder that made windows rattle. Clara hurried to light the oil lamps before the inevitable happened. The lights flickered once, then again, and then the house fell into darkness. Clara stood in the kitchen, blinking against the sudden night. Maisie clutched her leg, whispering, "Mama, I'm scared." "It's okay, baby," Clara said gently, brushing the girl's curls back. "Just the power going out. Happens all the time." She lit a second lamp and set it on the mantel. "Go. Get buttons and your blanket. We'll make a little camp in the living room." A knock came at the door, loud enough to be heard over the storm. Clara turned, already knowing who it would be. Colt stood on the porch, soaked to the bone, his shirt plastered to his chest and hat dripping rain. "Power's out," he said unnecessarily, wiping water from his brow. "You'll catch pneumonia out there," she said. "Come in before you drown." He hesitated, just a moment, then stepped inside. Clara handed him a towel, and he took it with a grateful nod. "The barn's holding, but the roof's leaking in the northeast corner." "Of course it is," Clara muttered. She sighed. "We'll check it tomorrow. Nothing we can do now." Maisie came padding down the stairs in her pajamas, dragging her blanket and stuffed cow. When she saw Colt, her face lit up. "Did you see the lightning?" "I did," Colt said, crouching to her. "Level. Lot of power in those clouds. You're brave to be out and about in it." Maisie beamed at the compliment and ran into the living room to set up her storm nest. Colt stood up, towel now draped over his shoulders, and looked toward the fireplace. "Mind if I get that going?" "Looks like it's going to be a long night," Clara nodded. "I was just about to." He knelt and started building a fire like he'd done it 100 times, which he probably had. It didn't take long before flames were crackling, casting golden light across the room. The warmth crept outward, comforting and slow. They sat around the hearth on the worn rug. Clara, Maisie, and Colt all wrapped in quilts, watching the storm flicker through the window. The atmosphere softened. Outside, the world raged. Inside, there was stillness, safety. Maisie eventually dozed off, head in Clara's lap, blanket pulled to her chin. Clara stroked her daughter's hair absently, eyes fixed on the flames. "She's a good kid," Colt said softly. "She is," Clara replied, her voice thick with exhaustion and pride. "She doesn't deserve the kind of life I've dragged her into." "You didn't drag her anywhere. You're doing everything to give her what she needs." Clara glanced at him. The firelight painted warm shadows across his face, outlining the hard jaw, the furrow in his brow. There was something about him, steadiness, stillness, that grounded her. It made her angry and comforted all at once. "I keep waiting for the moment I stop resenting Jack," she said suddenly. "But it hasn't come." Colt looked at her, not judging, just listening. "He wasn't a bad man," she continued, "just careless, selfish sometimes. I loved him, but toward the end, I was tired of cleaning up his messes. I kept thinking one day he'd change, grow into the man he was supposed to be. Then he died, and all I could think was, I'm still stuck, cleaning up after him, and that made me feel like the worst kind of person." Colt was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Grief's not clean. It's messy, ugly. Sometimes it leaves you madder than it does sad." Clara let the words settle. She hadn't expected to say all that. Certainly not to him. "You've been through something too," she said. His jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah," he didn't elaborate. She didn't press. Another long silence. The storm outside began to drift east, the thunder softening into the distance. The fire popped softly. And then it happened quiet, natural, like it was always meant to. Colt reached across the small space between them and gently touched her hand. Clara froze. Her instinct was to pull away. She didn't trust touch. Not anymore, but she didn't. She let his hand rest there, warm and rough against her palm. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something older. More wounded. Two broken people sitting side by side, offering what little comfort they could. "Thank you," she whispered, not even sure what for. He gave a soft nod. "You're not alone, Clara. Not anymore." West Ridge was a small town. Not just in population, but in privacy. Word traveled there faster than the wind, faster than a horse on fire. So it didn't take long after Colt Harding showed up at Clara McKinley's ranch for the rumors to start. First, it was whispers at the diner. Then side-eyes at the feed store. By the end of the week, even the postmaster had a theory about what that big fella's really doing out there. Clara didn't have time for gossip. She was juggling more repairs, sick calves, a leak in the roof over Maisie's room, and the kind of exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. But that didn't stop the chatter from finding her. "You seen that giant stranger up at McKinley's? Reckon he's just there for the work? She's not wasting any time for a widow, is she? Well, he sure fills out a shirt. And her barn, apparently." The snide comments came mostly from other women, some of them old friends, others never friendly to begin with. It wasn't about Colt, not really. It was about Clara. She was the woman who'd buried her husband under suspicious circumstances, kept to herself afterward, and now had a shirtless drifter swinging hammers on her property. Scandal was easier to chew on than sympathy. Clara first heard the worst of it while buying grain in town. Mrs. Hartley, owner of the general store and proud holder of everyone's secrets, smiled with more teeth than kindness. "Still keeping that ranch hand of yours around?" she asked, running a bag of sugar over the scanner. Clara nodded coolly. "He's a good worker." "Oh, I'm sure," Mrs. Hartley said, her tone dipped in honey and judgment. "Well, just be careful. Strong hands don't always mean good hearts, especially ones that show up out of nowhere." Clara said nothing, just grabbed her receipt, forced a smile, and walked out. But it stuck with her. Not the comment, but how easily it had come. By the next day, people had stopped being subtle. At church, she could feel the stares on her back like thorns. Even Pastor Glenn, who'd blessed Jack's grave with shaking hands, gave her a cautious glance when Colt joined her and Maisie at the community potluck. "Friend of the family?" someone asked as he piled a plate with cornbread. Colt looked over at Clara, waiting for her answer. She took a breath. "He's helping us at the ranch. That's all." But that's all didn't matter to people who'd already made up their minds. Colt noticed too. That evening, back at the ranch, as they sat on the porch sipping iced tea, he finally spoke up. "Folks in town don't like me much," Clara exhaled. "They don't know you." "They don't know you either. Not really," he said, watching. The prairies stretch into the horizon. "But they talk like they do." She glanced at him. "I've lived here my whole life." "Didn't matter." He nodded, slow and quiet. "That doesn't seem right." "It's not," she said simply, "but it's West Ridge." He looked down at his calloused hands, then back at her. "You want me to go?" The question cut deeper than she expected. He wasn't being dramatic, he meant it. He was giving her an out if she wanted to take it. She could avoid the gossip, protect her name. lock the gates around her heart again, and go back to doing it all herself. But the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, familiar, comfortable. "No," she said, "I want you to stay." He gave her a small nod, and that was the end of it. But the town wasn't done that week. A letter came from the local bank. Final notice. If she didn't make a significant payment, the ranch would go up for auction before the first frost. She sat at the kitchen table reading it over and over, heart pounding. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. There wasn't time for crying. Colt found her there later that night, the letter still open on the table. She didn't hide it. He read it once, then again, then looked at her. "Clara," he started, but she raised a hand. "I've got a few weeks, maybe less." He crouched beside her chair, eyes steady. "Let me help." "You already are. I mean really help." He said the next part without hesitation, without embarrassment. "I don't want to just fix fences. I want to fix this life with you. I'll work this land day and night if I have to. Hell, if it meant saving this ranch, I'd marry you tomorrow and get you pregnant by next spring." Clara stared at him, stunned. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or slap him. He smiled faintly, self-aware. "I know that came out blunt." She blinked, stunned by the rush of heat in her chest. Not offense, not anger. Something far more dangerous. Hope. Colt single quotes S-words hung in the kitchen like smoke. "I'll marry you tomorrow and get you pregnant by next spring." Clara didn't know what stunned her more, how matter-of-fact he'd said it, or the fact that some piece of her didn't immediately recoil, but she wasn't ready. Not for talk like that. Not with the weight of her past still dragging behind her like an anchor. She pushed back her chair, standing slowly. "That's not funny, Colt. I wasn't joking." She stared at him. He held her gaze, steady and calm. There was no bravado in his face, just honesty. And maybe something else. Desperation. "You don't know what you're offering," she said softly. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You're strong. You're loyal. You fight harder than anyone I've ever seen. You love your little girl so much it hurts." "That's not knowing someone," she said. "That's observing them. That's just details." He looked down, jaw working. Clara exhaled. "Where did you come from, Colt? You show up out of nowhere, quiet as a ghost, strong as a bull, and you work like you've got demons chasing. You offer marriage and babies like it's a barter deal." She stepped closer, arms crossed. "What are you running from?" He didn't answer right away. Then he moved to the back door, opened it, and stood staring out into the dark, warm night. The insects hummed in the distance. Coyotes howled somewhere far off. "I had a family once," he said, finally. "Wife. Named Emily. Son named Caleb. Lived outside of Roswell. Ranch wasn't much, but it was ours. We had 10 acres and a dream bigger than the land." Clara stayed silent. The way his voice changed soft, distant sent goosebumps down her arms. "We were barely macking it," he continued. "But Emily, she believed in me, believed in the life we were building. Caleb was 2 when the fever hit. His throat caught. By the time I got him to the hospital, his little body just gave out." Clara's hand slowly dropped to her side. Colt kept his eyes on the dark horizon. "Emily was never the same after that. Can't blame her. I wasn't either. She started taking drives late at night. Didn't say much anymore. One night she didn't come back. Cops found her car at the base of a ravine. They said it looked like she might have fallen asleep." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Clara felt her heart twist inside her chest. Not pity, something deeper, recognition. That kind of grief didn't fade. It clung to people like shadows. "I sold the ranch," Colt said. "Didn't want the land without them. Spent a year drifting. Worked a dozen jobs. Nothing stuck. Until I ended up in West Ridge with a stranger pointing me to a widow with..." Too much land and too much pain. He finally turned to face her. I didn't come here looking for anything, Clara. But then I saw you fighting to hold this place together for your girl. I saw what I'd lost, and maybe, just maybe, what I could still build. Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She didn't trust tears. They blurred things, softened people when they needed to be sharp. Why didn't? You tell me, she whispered. He shrugged lightly. Didn't seem like my grief had a place here. She took a deep breath, then walked past him, standing at the edge of the porch, gripping the rail. You ever wonder, she said quietly, if we were built to survive the people we love? Colt stepped beside her. Every day. She looked up at the stars clear and endless over the ranch. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm still mad at Jack. I don't trust myself to feel anything real anymore. I'm not asking you to feel anything you're not ready to, he said. I just want to help, to stay, even if it's just for the work. She turned to look at him. But that's not what you want. You said it yourself. No, he admitted, it's not. But I'll take whatever part of your world you're willing to let me in on. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her since Jack died. She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she reached out slowly, unsure, and touched his arm. It was barely a touch. But for Colt, it was everything. For the first time since losing Emily and Caleb, he felt something that wasn't pain. And for the first time since burying Jack, Clara felt something that wasn't grief. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was real. And it was beginning. 3 days after the storm, Clara received the final letter from the bank. There were no more warnings, no extensions, no polite language, just numbers and a date. If she couldn't make a payment by the end of the month, the ranch would be seized and listed for auction. 27 days? That was all that stood between her and the end of everything she'd fought to keep. Clara read the letter on the porch steps, the wood warm under her legs and the air dry as bone. Maisie was playing in the field with Buttons, her stuffed cow. Chasing butterflies as if the world wasn't about to fall apart, she folded the letter, slowly, and set it beside her like it might burn if she held it any longer. Colt came up the path, wiping grease from his hands. He'd been working on the tractor all morning, shirtless and stained, his hat low over his brow. Hydraulics are shot, he said, squinting toward the house. I might be able to jerry-rig a bypass, but it won't hold long. Clara didn't respond. He stopped short when he saw the look on her face. What is it? She handed him the letter without a word. Colt read it silently. His jaw tightened. Then he looked at her, and what he saw broke his heart. Not fear, not even anger, just that same quiet resignation she wore the day he first arrived. Like she'd already accepted the loss. Like she didn't believe she deserved to hope anymore. That's it, she said flatly. End of the road. They're coming for it. No, they're not. Her head snapped up. Colt, no. He repeated, voice low, raw. You've been fighting too damn long to roll over now. There's no fight left, she said, eyes burning. The ranch is falling apart. I'm behind on everything. There's no money coming in. No help. It's over. No, he said again, louder now. He dropped the letter to the porch and stepped forward, crouching in front of her. I won't let them take this from you. You can't stop it. I will, Clara. I'll work every acre of this land myself if I have to. I'll sell my truck, my tools, hell, I'll pawn my own damn boots. I'll take 3 jobs in town. I'll do anything to keep this place alive. Her voice cracked. Why? Why are you doing this? He took her hands in his. Because I see you. I see the fire in you. The way you fight for your little girl. The way you break your back and don't ask a soul for help. Because I lost a family once, and I'm not going to stand here and lose another. Her breath caught. Then softer. Colt. He pressed on, eyes blazing now. Let me stay and work for you. I don't want a paycheck. I don't want thanks. I want a place in this life you're building. And if that's not enough hell, Clara, I'll give you another baby if that's what it takes to prove I'm not going anywhere." She let out a stunned breath, half laugh, half sob. "You're insane." "I'm desperate," he said, "but I'm real. I'm right here. And I'm not offering you pity, I'm offering you partnership. A chance to stop carrying this burden alone." She stood, suddenly overwhelmed, pulling away and pacing toward the edge of the porch. "This ranch is cursed," she muttered. "Everything. It touches falls apart. Jack died here, my dreams died here. And now it's going to bury me too." "Then let me help dig you out," Colt said. Clara turned around, her face trembling now with the pressure of everything years of holding it together. Years of silence, of pretending to be still when she was breaking inside. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he replied. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe alone." They stood there in silence, the weight of his words settling in the still summer air. Then Maisie's voice rang out from the pasture. "Mama, look, I found a bird's nest." Clara turned to watch her daughter wave something tiny and fragile in the air. A reminder. A reason. The last and strongest one. She looked back at Colt. "I don't know what this is," she said. "I don't know if it's love or madness or desperation." He stepped closer. "Maybe it's all three. But I know one thing for sure." "What's that?" "I'm not leaving." She looked into his eyes, steady, weathered, true. And this time, she didn't walk away. The night air was thick with heat and questions. Clara stood barefoot on the back porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching the shadows ripple across the fields. Inside, the house was quiet. Maisie had fallen asleep early, and Colt was down in the barn, fixing the busted stable door by lantern light, refusing, as usual, to rest. She couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. "I'll stay. I'll work. I'll give you a child. If that's what it takes." It had sounded wild, even reckless, but not insincere. And now that those words had settled in her chest, she couldn't stop asking herself, was this love? Or just two broken people trying to patch up what life had torn down? She'd been running on fumes for so long, she didn't even know what love was supposed to look like anymore. Jack had said all the right things too until the promises cracked. And the pressure came down, until the gambling started, until the lies crept in late at night. But Colt didn't lie. He didn't even talk much. He just worked, listened, fixed things no one else noticed. He never pushed, never flirted, never asked for more than she could give. And maybe that was what scared her most. She wasn't used to steady. She was used to storms. The screen door creaked and Colt appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't speak, just leaned against the porch post beside her, quiet and patient. They stood there a long time. Finally, she said, "Why are you really here, Colt?" He looked at her, puzzled. "I told you. You told me what you lost, but not what you want." He let out a slow breath, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "I want peace. I want dirt under my nails and something to show for it. I want a reason to come home at night and not feel hollow. I want ... you, Clara. Not because I think you need saving, but because I've never met anyone who made survival look like grace." The words hit harder than she expected. She turned to him, heart thudding in her chest. "What if I can't give you anything back? What if I've forgotten how to care for someone without losing myself?" He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was soft, reverent. Then, "I'll wait until you remember." Her breath hitched. The night around them felt electric charged with more than the heat. And all the things she'd buried began to rise. The ache, the want, the loneliness. The fear that if she let herself feel something again, she'd break. In a way she couldn't repair. But Colt was patient. Still, like the land. itself. So she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't careful. It was full of hunger and need, grief and longing. Two people clinging to each other in the wreckage of what they'd both lost. His hand settled on her waist, steadying her like he had the first time he touched a wild horse. She gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. Her barrier steel reinforced, tightly welded, split open like dry earth, finally giving way to rain. When they broke apart. Breathless and shaken, Clara rested her forehead against his chest. "This is crazy," she murmured. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "But it feels real." She pulled back, searching his face. "I don't want to regret this." "You won't," he said. "Not with me." There was no promise in his voice, just certainty. That night, they made love with the lights out and the windows open, the warm wind stirring the curtains like a whisper. No words, just hands, mouths, and years of pain easing into something softer. Something new. In the early hours, Clara lay in his arms, heart calm for the first time in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring: bank threats, ranch work, town gossip, but right now, wrapped in the silence of Colt's steady breath, she didn't care. Maybe this was love, or maybe it was escape, but either way, it felt like the start of something worth risking everything for. 2 weeks passed. The days blurred into a rhythm: early mornings, long hours in the sun, aching muscles, and quiet meals on the porch. But something had shifted between them. The glances, the silences, the soft touches passed like a secret language. Clara didn't talk much about that night in the dark, and Colt didn't push. He never asked where things were going. He just stayed, worked, waited. But the waiting didn't last forever. It started with the nausea. Clara chalked it up to stress at first. She hadn't been sleeping well. The heat had been brutal, and her nerves were threadbare with the bank deadline creeping closer. But when she found herself getting dizzy during morning chores and skipping lunch without meaning to, she started to wonder. Then came the moment in the barn. 1 minute she was lifting a feed sack, the next she was doubled over, catching herself on a stall door while the world tilted. Colt was there in seconds. "Easy," he said, steadying her with both hands. "You all right?" "Yeah," she lied, brushing him off. "Just tired." But he didn't buy it. Neither did she. That night, after Maisie had gone to bed, Clara sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the pregnancy test like it might change if she waited long enough. 2 lines. Clear as day. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, a strange wave of emotions washing over her: shock, fear, disbelief. And underneath it all, something even more dangerous. Hope. The next morning, Colt found her in the garden, kneeling in the dirt with her hands buried in the soil like she was trying to ground herself. She looked up when he approached, her eyes unreadable. "We need to talk," she said. He knelt beside her, not hesitating. "All right." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Colt didn't react at first. His eyes held hers, steady, waiting for her to flinch or pull away. When she didn't, a slow breath escaped him, and then something she hadn't seen before. A quiet, unshakable joy. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I took a test," she said. "Twice." He nodded, eyes shining, with something more than just happiness. Something like reverence. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. "I don't know," she admitted. "I didn't plan for this. I wasn't ready. I don't even know what this means." He reached for her hand, covered in soil. "It means we're not running anymore. From grief, from life, from each other." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "This isn't the time. I've got 20 days before the bank comes. I don't even know if we'll have this land to raise a baby on." "We will," he said, calm and sure. "We'll find a way." Clara almost envied the certainty in his voice, but something in it made her believe him. That afternoon, Colt made a call to a contact he hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend who ran a cattle auction business in Amarillo. He arranged a deal. If he could deliver 10 healthy steers by the end of the week, he'd get a cash advance large enough to make the payment on the ranch. Clara was stunned. "You have 10 steers?" He nodded. "I've been feeding a few of yours." "Separately. The strongest ones?" "I had a feeling we might need a plan B. You planned all this?" "Not the baby," he said with a small grin. "But the rest?" "Yeah, I told you I wasn't going to let this place go under." They worked harder than ever that week, branding, sorting, prepping the cattle for transport. Clara didn't push herself as much now that she knew. But she was still out there before sunrise, every morning, boots on, belly barely different. But everything else changed. By Friday, the trailer was loaded and Colt was gone before dawn. He returned the next evening with dust in his hair and a check in his hand. Clara held it like it might disappear. "This is real?" He nodded, made the call to the bank on the drive home. "You've bought yourself time." "No," she said, voice quiet. "We did." He smiled, and for the first time since he showed up on her ranch, Clara leaned into his arms without hesitation. There was still more to face, still debts, still town whispers, still the terrifying question of what came next. But there was a new kind of future now, one growing quietly beneath her ribs, a new life, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. The first autumn rain came slow and steady, soaking the hard-packed soil and breathing new life into the brittle land. Clara stood at the window with a cup of tea, one hand resting on the curve of her growing belly. The ranch looked different now, not just because of the new coat of white paint Colt had slapped on the barn, or the steady rhythm returning to the land, but because it felt like something was finally coming back to life. Something in her. Something in all of them. She never thought she'd get this far. After Jack died, after the debts piled up, after the ranch nearly slipped through her fingers, she'd resigned herself to quiet survival. Not peace. Not love. Not family. But now, Colt was out there stringing new fencing with Maisie trotting after him, hammer in one hand and snack bag in the other. She called him Colt still, but Clara heard the change in her voice, a trust that hadn't been there before, a quiet affection. He hadn't tried to replace her father. He'd simply shown up day after day until he belonged. The town was slower to warm. There were whispers at the feed store, stares at church, the widow shacked up with a drifter, pregnant again before the first man's name on the gravestone had even weathered. Some folks couldn't help but judge, but Clara no longer flinched under their eyes. She held her head high, her belly full and her heart fuller. She'd lived through worse than gossip, and besides, the land didn't care what anyone thought. It just needed tending. So did she. And Colt, he never wavered. He put his name on the feed invoices. He helped repair the well pump. He built Maisie a tire swing and started carving a cradle out of an old cedar stump. He even took Clara to the county office to talk about refinancing the ranch together. As partners. One night, as they lay in bed exhausted, dusty, and content, Clara turned to him. "You know this still might fall apart," she whispered. Colt opened one eye. "Yup, you're okay with that?" He reached over, tracing his thumb over the small stretch marks just beginning to show on her stomach. "As long as I'm here with you, yeah. I'm okay with it." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't a grand promise. But it steadied her like nothing else could. The day the baby came was one of those wild days where the weather didn't know what it wanted. Storm clouds stacked high in the distance, wind snapping across the pasture. Clara went into labor just after sunrise, and Colt didn't leave her side once. By sunset, with Maisie camped out at the neighbors and the midwife wiping sweat from her brow, Clara gave a final cry and brought a healthy baby boy into the world. The first sound he made was a warbling, stubborn cry just like his sister's years ago. But the second sound was Clara's soft laugh, tears sliding down her cheeks as Colt kissed her forehead. "You did it," he murmured. "No," she thought. "We did." They named him Levi, strong and simple, like the hands that had held her through fire. And rain. The next week, the town surprised her. The women from church came with casseroles. The local vet dropped off a box of diapers. Even Mr. Denton from the bank, usually the gruffest man this side of the county, stopped by with a hand-knit baby blanket his wife had made. "I misjudged you," he said to Clara, nodding toward Colt. "Thought you were throwing it all away. But turns out you just found someone worth building with." Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. The proof was all around them. That winter, the ranch made a profit for the first time in 4 years. Small, but honest. The land was producing again. The fences held. The water flowed. So did the love. Not flashy, not perfect, but real. On Christmas morning, Colt stood with Levi in his arms while Maisie tore into presents with glee. Clara watched them, heart so full it hurt. She stepped outside, looking over the land, their land, and let the cold air sting her cheeks. Jack would always be part of her story. But he was the past. Colt, this ranch, these children, they were the roots she never knew she'd grow again. As the sun rose over the wet fields, Clara whispered to the morning air, "I'm still here." And this time, she wasn't alone.